What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we are continuing our Ghostbusters month. We've got the fans in, and now we're going to be talking about the movies. The retrospective starts, and I'm getting someone who's giving me a season's greetings, one of the pop gorillas himself. How are you doing, James? You okay?
I'm good, thank you, Scott. Yeah, I'm good. You're getting rivalry with Max going here with your intros.
I'm trying. Yeah, I want that energy. I want that energy, definitely.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the film, we are going to give a pop and sort of let everyone sort of, go find you and that sort of thing. But I want to give a shout out to Pop Gorillas. And I haven't had a chance to ask you or Tony yet, because it is a fantastic idea.
Oh, that's nice.
I love the idea. It's wicked. And like little nuggets of awesomeness. But explain to the listeners what Pop Gorillas is.
Yeah, so it's Tony, myself, and my sister Rhea, who's obviously got a blossoming career at the moment in the podcast world. So at the moment, it's the three of us, and we are recording our thoughts on anything from pop culture in less time than it takes to listen to a song. So hence the pop part of our name. We're just, it's good fun. Like, we did the theme of the Halloween saga for October. But other than that, it's really just what we're reading and watching at any given time, which I quite like the randomness of it. Tony, his consumption of books is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we get to hear all his views on the books that he's reading. I'm mostly film, so I guess I come at it from that angle. And then my sister has the nice kind of blend of the worlds and different tastes. So, yeah, hopefully it's offering something for everybody, really.
Yeah, it's good. It's great. It's part of the Comics in Motion channel. But yeah, no, I was using it as I was going along. I was watching the Halloween movies. And so, yeah, it was a nice little sort of touch base. Like I say, literally between 3 and 4 minutes, most of them. Fantastic, great idea. I love it. This won't be that concise because I don't shut up. So, I've tried to do those things. I tried to do it on YouTube once. I was like, I'll keep this to 10 minutes. Never could. Like, not possible for me. Got verbal diarrhea. But today we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters, 1984 Ghostbusters. This whole retrospective is going to be slightly different. Usually I sort of cram in a couple of films into an episode. But this time I've got someone different for every film. And you mentioned Rhea starting a Femme on Film. She's coming in to do 2016 Ghostbusters. Who better at this point to do 2016? So, starting with you, Enemy, your sister. That's keeping it in the family.
Yeah.
So let's start then. So 1984, and where did you first see Ghostbusters?
Yeah, I obviously thought you might ask that question. I've been thinking about it, and if I'm honest, I don't know. I mean, I'm 4 in 1984, so I'm pretty sure I wasn't taken to the cinema to see this.
Yeah.
I have got a brother who's 8 years older than me, so perhaps, he may have been, certainly at this point. But it was something that was on hard rotation in our house. So I presume it was recorded off TV, which is where we watched a lot of stuff, where I know a lot of us did in the 80s, which, as it turns out, was totally against the law, which I didn't ever really think about, but of course it was, because you're breaking copyright. But we all did it, so it's fine. But it was on on a loop. It was on loads. I also had the cassette of the soundtrack that would be on hard rotation on my Walkman as well. We used to go away every holiday, as a lot of kids do with their families, up to the Lake District, which now I'm to the age now where I'm thinking, wow, that would be amazing. When you're, primary school to secondary school age, it's like, oh God, I'll go with my parents again and they're going to drag me out walking in the rain. It's funny how we all turn into them eventually, isn't it? But so that was always on in the car and the drive up, a mixture of that and the Return of the Jedi score.
Nice.
The trusted Walkman keeping me company. So it was, I guess, like so many people, it was just in my life. It was part of my my cultural existence at that point. But I can't think exactly when I saw the movie for the first time.
Mm. It is interesting. It sort of seems to like just to osmosis for a lot. I've spoken to a few people. It does seem to just appear. Like you're not the only one who said to me, like, I can't remember the first time. It was just there, and then it's become a part of the cultural landscape since. Did you ever watch the cartoon? I mean, were you a real Ghostbusters fan?
I was. I mean, again, not religiously. Wouldn't have said. I can't remember when was that, a Saturday morning.
86 to 90, really.
Yeah, I mean, I was into Turtles and all that kind of stuff in that same sort of era. So, and I have watched a bit of it since. When my eldest, he's 9 now, and we watched Ghostbusters a couple of years ago, I think, was when I showed him it. So we delved into some of the real Ghostbusters cartoons as well, and it was nostalgic watching that back. And a few of it was ringing some bells, but I couldn't sit and tell you any of the plots of any of the episodes or anything, if I'm honest.
Don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz, but yes, it's yeah, it's cool. It's interesting how sort of people sort of, so you're not like, they say there's real dedicated guys are ghost heads. You're not that far. It's just a part of your sort of pop culture landscape then, really, as you've grown up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that sums it up perfectly.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the film then. So, and we'll get to not so much the elephant in the room, but the Phelps in the room.
Sure.
Which hangs over like a shadow. So we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, just the film in general. You've gone back to it. You watched it with fresh eyes today. What are your sort of first thoughts then, going back and watching it? Does it stand up? Do you still enjoy it, or do you think it's dated? It's an 80s film as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, of course, parts of it are dated. I mean, we could sit and talk about the effects. I mean, I think they're charming and in their datedness. Obviously, some of the stuff Venkman does has not dated very well. I mean, other than those two things, I would say everything else about it absolutely hits. It's got a classic kind of 3-act structure, hasn't it? But it really almost strictly adheres to it. Kind of 30 to 35 minutes. Let's get the team together. Let's get them set up. 35 minutes. We're out busting ghosts, and then we get the same for the finale. So it's got that classic structure. But it really does balance, and this is why it's become such a cultural phenomenon. It balances that world of horror and comedy like nothing else.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said about the structure. When I watched it this week, I did a time because it's 1:45, but you take away the credits, it's about 1:38, 1:40, 39. That they get to the Sedgwick Hotel to bust Slimer at 30 minutes.
Right.
And the chaos at the end, sort of like all the when the ghosts are released and you get sort of like the zombie taxi driver and all that kind of stuff. That happens with 35 minutes to go. So it's probably about 30 minutes of film. So you're totally right. Like there's literally there's a 30-minute first act, a 30-minute finale, and a 45-minute second act.
It's so tight. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and it's great. That's what I say. It is, considering the cast, and they've all come up through SNL and the Canadian version, which I forget.
Second City, is that
Second City? That's it. Yeah, well remembered. So guys that have are used to doing sort of like off the cuff, doing that sort of thing, and doing sort of the just sort of going off page. Like it seems like
really, so like a bit improvisational, isn't it?
Improv, like, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, but that feels like a tightness and almost like a respect for what Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd have written. And I get the feeling that, like, I haven't seen interviews, like Ivan Reitman's reining them in. I'm pretty sure there are scenes that have never appeared. There's cuts. That like, right, we're going to let Bill or Dan or whoever go off and do his thing. Right, you've done your bit. Now do the words on the page. Let's see which turns out better. But yeah, it is. It's so tight. And it's so sort of economical. To its detriment at one point, because the one thing I've noticed as I've got older and I've watched it is, I'm going to ask you this because it's an odd question. How long do you think the film covers?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there's just that one line from Winston, isn't there, at the end when he says, I've been doing this for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
So we know that, and he feels like he's been in it for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So I guess 6 weeks.
Yeah, this is it. Again, I went online and checked this, and there is no definitive answer. And people do say like anything between 9 and about 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Sorry, 9 months to about 6 to 8 weeks. So some people think like, oh, this has been going on for ages.
Yeah.
You know, but then others are like, oh no, it's about 3 months, or less.
The seasons don't really seem to change, do they? Which is a bit of a
it's clearer in the second film, like, you know, because it leads up to a definitive annual milestone. But yeah, it's just odd. Like you say, it was filmed. It was filmed for a June release, so it was filmed over winter and into spring. And so you're right. It feels like almost like a winter film when you watch it. Like it feels cold. But yeah, no, it was just something I recognised this time. I was like, yeah, I don't know, how long do the Ghostbusters? How long are they around for?
I never thought of it actually until you'd ask, and then that Winston quote popped into my head.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a miracle that the film comes out in the way that it does, doesn't it? In terms of, as you said, the improvisational nature of the cast, the fact they had a year to get it done.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we're talking about it here now, all these years later, and it wasn't just something that came and went, just goes to show the amount of quality that was behind that camera making that movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I don't. There's a couple of documentaries. One of the best ones called "Cleaning Up the Town." It's fantastic, and in that, like, it highlights and the sort of in the movies that made us on Netflix did an episode on it, and like you say, had a year to make it from the moment they were given the green light, including all these sort of special effects. And also a budget that they were like, you cannot go over. I think it's 30 million. They were like, you got 30 million, like that's it. 30 million, 12 months, go. Yeah. And I think at that point they were still looking at the original concept, which was, you know, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi were like, yeah, we want this thing in the future, and it's going to have like massive ghosts in the second act, and then we're going to lead up to this massive thing. And I think they were like, no, you've got to go away, pin this down to something else. So it's one of those sort of like lightning in the bottle kind of scenarios, isn't it? Everything fell into place. But yeah, even the casting, like, you know, obviously the four. I mean, what's your thoughts on the cast? Like, you know, all four of them. Just start with the actual Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I think again, like, the transitory nature of growing older and rewatching things is so fascinating, isn't it? I mean, when you're growing up, Venkman is the guy. Like, he's the funniest. He gets the most screen time. Obviously, he gets all the best lines, which I know obviously some of them were Murray's own. But now when I watch it, it's all about Egon. Harold Ramis, he's just absolutely amazing in the role, and just totally owns all his moments. I love it when he's like, I collect spores and molds and fungus. Like, it's just so funny. It's like dry, understated delivery. But those three particularly, like, I mean, it makes sense if they all knew each other. The chemistry is so good, isn't it? It's kind of hard watching it and thinking about Ernie Hudson, and he's not very good, I don't think, actually. It's particularly stacked next to these three. Yeah. But then also, if he's been left out the whole time and his role has been reduced, and how much energy did he have to give to it anyway? I'd be interested to think about.
Ernie Hudson's an interesting one, because he originally, obviously, it was offered to Eddie Murphy, and then he was all up for it, but then he started contributing lines and ideas, and they were a bit like, oh, this is an ego problem. It's not gonna work. So he was taken out, and then they realized that actually lots of because with Eddie leaving, they were like, actually, he's got all the good lines. Let's redistribute them. And so Ernie Hudson's sort of left with this, half apart, in all honesty. Yeah,
it does feel like that, yeah.
And he is almost like, well, he's literally the fourth wheel in this situation rather than the third wheel. But he has a couple of moments that I do like. Like, he has screen presence. He's still quite young at this point. He has screen presence. But yeah, I don't know. You're right. I feel bad for him. Like, he seems to have done the best out of it in the long run as well. Like, you know,
It's the scene in the mayor's office for me where, like, obviously everything is so sparky and so good. Like, in terms of a scene, in a comedy scene, has my absolute favorite line delivery of all time, when Bill Murray totally annihilates Peck. Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doing that line justice. It is literally the funniest line in cinema, and you know it's coming, and I still raucously laugh every single time. But by comparison, when he's doing his like moment coming in to talk to the mayor, it feels a bit weak. But I love this town at the end is awesome. So yeah, checks and balances.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I say it's the bit he does have, like, the two lines that always stand out for me are that thing where he says that, I've seen shit that would turn you white, and he sort of, like you say, it's funny, but it's not quite nailing the delivery of the sort of the professional sort of comedic actors. But that sort of thing at the end, I love this town, feels like a triumphant moment, like, and he feels like a New Yorker as well, which is really cool. So yeah, no, he does sort of get paid off. He isn't. It's an interesting one because this is the 80s, and this is a very different time, and I'm sort of going to try and tread carefully on this. Like, every poster we get now has got every bleeder on it. Like, it's about who can we get on to. I mean, let's be clear. Dune Part 1 that came out recently, Zendaya's on the poster because they knew she was in it. She's in it for all of like 3 minutes. Like, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but like, if you know the story, you'll know why. Like, but like, she's still on the poster. With this, it's only the three of them. It's only it's only Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis. And it's always bothered me. Like, I hate using, when I promote this and it goes, I will not use that poster because there are 4 Ghostbusters. There aren't 3. There are 4, and so I've always hated that poster. I prefer the Ghost logo. And so because it feels a bit like he's an afterthought, and I really sort of feel that's a shame.
Yeah, because when they come together, like the shot of them on the top of the Dana's building at the end when they're going towards Gozer and they've decided they're going to cross the streams, like that's such a cool iconic shot. You're right, why isn't that one on the poster? Absolutely, and he fits perfectly in that moment. It's almost as if as the film goes on, he does get a bit more to do, and perhaps he's aware of that and he's trying a bit harder, or he's got into the rhythm of the comedy. I don't know, like, he does seem to get better and better as the film goes on, and in that final act he's definitely at his best. Yeah, I think, as I say, if you're sort of, I don't know how old he was, he must be sort of late 20s, early 30s when he's doing this. And if you're then around those 3, you've got to be on your A game, and it must be exhausting to try and... it feels quite intimidating, I bet.
Yeah, and you either try and match them, or you do something different. And I think you can tell there's a couple of scenes where he's not sure. But you're right, in that finale, like, he finds his role. Like, that's the Winston I think we'll get to know and love. It'll be interesting. I'm interested how when he comes back, because he of all of them have probably he's probably kept himself in the best shape. He's sort of still acting quite frequent and stuff. So when they come back and you have like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, if and when they suit up in the next film, like, I get the feeling that Ernie Hudson's still going to be like, oh, I look good in this stuff. Yeah. Like, you guys look old, but I look good.
He's going to have like a Will Smith and Men in Black moment.
Yeah, yes.
Between you and me, I make this shit look good. Yeah. Or I still make this shit look good, maybe.
That would be quite cool if he had that line. The thing is, they say, if you think back, this goes back to these let's say the what ifs, like a Marvel what if it had been Eddie Murphy. I always think about this. I think it'd have been too much.
Yeah, he would have stolen it completely, wouldn't he? Because this is Beverly Hills Cop era. He was 19 when he made 48 Hours.
Right. Or 21.
That's what, 82, is it?
82. Yeah. So this is 2 years later. So he'd be younger than 24. And riding high on that ego. So I think it would have been. I think it'd been a very, very different film.
I think you need that slightly straighter man, and I think It's just a shame they didn't like allow for him to do a bit more with that straightness, I suppose. That didn't come out the way I meant it, that sentence.
No,
but...
I know what you mean though. Yeah, because if you've got three comedy guys, and then you need the straight man, you need he's the point of view character, and that's one of the weird things. He comes in very late to the story as well. And I've always thought like he should come in a lot earlier. And he did originally. They sort of moved the script around and he ended up coming later. But you talk about the straight man. I wanted to talk about Harold Ramis again. Because obviously we've seen Harold Ramis in other things, Stripes with him and Bill Murray again. But you're right, like where the other two go quite big, like with Egon, he brings it like really down. And he has like really subtle moments that I love. When they're sort of inspecting the firehouse and the estate agent's there, and Ray's all excited about the pole, and in sort of like, and Venkman looks at Egon, and Egon's just going, like, don't like shaking his head, but like doing it really subtly, and he's like, I think we'll take it. And then when they're at the Sedgwick, and he's sort of like they're trying to do the costing, and he's just like,
so good,
he puts his fingers up on his face, and he's like, that's £2,000 just those little bits. Throughout the film, like Harold Ramis is brilliant in this film. And so it's like you're right, because when you're a kid, it's the sort of Bill Murray's front and center in this film. But as you get older, you watch the characters and you go, oh, I like what they're doing. They're very, very good. Let's just have a quick talk about the wider cast, because there's obviously there's two others, and then there's some others, and we'll talk about Peck as well, but. Sigourney Weaver and Lewis Tully, played by check. What is one of my Rick Moranis? Jesus Christ, my memory's today. Basically, Rick Moranis coming from Second City, Canadian, and then Sigourney Weaver again, a non-comedic actress coming in, hot off of, well, not really hot off, but of Alien, and doing some quite serious roles. But yeah, what are your thoughts on sort of those as Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis?
And we're going to come back to that word again. Like Sigourney Weaver, I mean, she is funny in this, and she goes on to be funny in other things, doesn't she? Particularly, obviously, Galaxy Quest. But her playing this straight is what makes the role work completely. Because Bill Murray's like that scene when he's coming to her apartment and he's got his little sniffer thing, like her little deadpan reactions to him there. Again, like, excuse me, if she'd been going big there, that scene wouldn't have worked at all. So I think she was perfect casting. And I think it's one of those like maybe counter casting things we see, when Jim Carrey's in The Truman Show, or people expect her to do one thing and she does something else. So yeah, I think she's fantastic in this. Rick Moranis, however, I mean, Bill Murray is rightly celebrated. He is amazing in this film. And it made his career, really, didn't it? I mean, this is it from this point. I know he'd already been a big success on Saturday Night Live, but I mean, in terms of film career. But Rick Moranis, my God, like watching it today, just everything he does is so funny. Particularly the scene when they come to shut off the, I can't think what it's called. What's like the
protection grid?
Absolutely. When he's copying everybody and he's mirroring. It's fantastic. Yeah, I think we all know how talented he is, and we know the reasons why he made the decision to step away from acting. It was clearly the right one for him and what he needed to do for his family. But it is a loss for us because he's such a talent.
You're right. I mean, again, he came in last minute as well. It's one of those lightning rockers because he came originally, like they looked at John Candy, and John Candy wanted to do like a big German character with Dobermans and stuff. And they were like, again, it's not right. And he came in, and from what I've read and stuff, like, they just gave him some mild direction, and he just sort of created this character.
Oh, it's so good, isn't it?
And everything about Lewis Tully is just perfect on screen. Because he is a caricature, he is a comedy character, but he also feels real. I love the fact that he throws a party. He's an accountant, and he throws the party for his clients so he can do it as a tax write-off.
It's the way he introduces that couple when they come in as well. It's so good.
Yeah, he quotes how much like they've got on their mortgage and other stuff, and he's like, and they're doing all right. Yeah. He's such a great character, but you say it's more like you say, it's not just the Lewis Tully, it's when he's Vince Clotho and he plays the mime and stuff. His mime, like you say, he rubs the pizza on his face at one point, and yeah, he sort of he's and this is that thing, the difference between sort of, as you said about Eddie Murphy, not just deadpan Eddie Murphy, because I love Eddie Murphy, especially in this period, but he would have stolen those scenes. He would have been larger than life. Where sort of like Rick Moranis is doing fantastic stuff, but it's in the background a lot of times. Like you said, when they sort of come down and he's doing the pointing, when the guy's pointing at him and stuff, and it's all in the background. It's I don't know how much of that is directed or him just doing it, but it's not there to steal the screen. It's there because it's funny. And it's quite a tense moment, but it's still adding that levity. And I think, this is something I often think is missing in films today, where they'll build up to it. There's certain directors, and I'm not going to sort of like, shit in anyone, but they've made films I haven't, where they'll have a great moment of tension or a great moment of horror, then they undercut it immediately with a big joke.
Yeah.
And I will say, I find that with Thor Ragnarok, and I think Taika Waititi can do that. Mostly it's very good, but there's moments you go, you've done it with a joke, and they don't do that with this. Like the humor, it's humorous without trying to be jokey. Yeah. And I think Rick Moranis got that memo. Like what they say,
definitely.
He knew the assignment, as they say.
I think the bits I've read with him talking about what it was like being on set, and for him, he's looking up to these actors he's with at this point as well. He uses that word about like the collaboration, the idea of like they come from improv background, and in improv it's about making the other guy look good. And I think that's what this film does. Like everybody is working hard to make the joke work or make the scene work or give that moment its time to shine or to settle. So I think that's why there isn't any of this undercutting. I agree with you. Like Judd Apatow is clearly very influenced by Ghostbusters and this improvisational era of comedy from Saturday Night Live and all that. And at times he doesn't get it quite right.
Yeah.
Where this gets it right every single time. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I think other than those things you highlighted, or I highlighted at the start, I think every joke lands. Every performance is absolutely correct. And I think it's because everybody wanted to make a really good film.
Yeah, I think you're right. They all wanted to make it, but you're right about the other thing as well. But if it's fun on set,
right? Yeah,
people will bring their A game. Yeah. I think the only thing that I think, from what I understand, day one was the only really tense day of this. I can't remember what it was they were filming. Oh no, I know what it was they were filming. So when they have the montage and they're running around and they've got them in New York, that was the first thing they ever filmed. And obviously all in kit. So, Aykroyd and Ramis are there in their sort of the flight suits, the packs on or something. And no one could get hold of Bill Murray.
Right. Okay. That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. He'd been in France after doing something else, and they weren't even sure if he was in the country. And he apparently sort of like worded said, yes, he is. And he will be on set because he doesn't have an agent. It still doesn't. And then he turned up a little bit late, but apparently they were very tense on that first day. And there was some sort of irritation, but once it got flowing, they were all good.
Doesn't he also not sign a contract and all this kind of weird stuff as well? Like he'll do a verbal agreement, and so you never know until you start filming if he's going to turn up and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think there's a few people he will have like Wes Anderson, like he's got obviously a very good relationship with, and will have those kind of things. But like I say, he doesn't have an agent. He has an 0800 number or something, right? And you have to ring it and leave him a message, like convince him to come. That you want to do a film with him. It's very bizarre. But you're right. All the cast sort of are bringing their A game, and you can sort of see that they gel. And talking about Sigourney Weaver, one of the things I saw this on a tweet this morning, actually, and it really made me think. It seemed very sort of apt that we're doing this. It just had that scene you just mentioned of her basically kicking Venkman out of her apartment. Because he's trying to give it all that charm, and he is very lecherous. I'll admit it. Right at that point, he's being very lechy. But it doesn't faze her. No,
it doesn't. It's true.
And she's just like, I'm not putting up with your bullshit. Get out. And this woman had tweeted like, now that's representation.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's a really good point because she's not a bimbo. She's not being fawned to or anything like. Yeah, to start this up, she lives on her own in New York. She's a musician.
Yeah.
And she takes
In a
no
penthouse, no less.
Yeah, in a really good apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't take any shit from the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're like, actually, yeah, she's actually a really strong, independent character. She isn't made at no point. She's at no point is she the damsel in distress.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she becomes possessed, but it's not like she's not solely there to be saved. Like,
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that interesting. I think, and also to this point, obviously, that to Venkman and his point, yes, he starts off lecherous, but I actually think it's her strength and her, but that actually gives him his arc.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the end of it, like, he's one of the ones that's like, yeah, all right, I'm willing to sacrifice my life to save the world and save the city. So I think Sigourney Weaver playing it the way she does makes Dana Barrett sort of a really strong female character, which obviously, probably maybe why she got the job, actually, considering she's come off of Ellen Ripley and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Because Franklin's not the only one, is he? Like, Lewis is kind of constantly trying to chat her up. He's clearly looking at his peephole, waiting for her to come home, isn't he? And try and catch her in the corridor and stuff. So
yeah.
And she's very strong there, and she plays him off really well, and she never comes across as being, I don't know, like that seems really well handled, I think, because like she handles him really well. She's not rude to him. She clearly like kind of shuts him down. But yeah, I agree. I think I can see her being a role model for young women to look up to. Absolutely.
I love the comedy of that as well, because you say about sort of there was something you said before, and I wanted to make a joke, but like you said about Rick Moranis looking up to these guys, literally looking up to Sigourney Weaver as well.
Yeah,
like, she's 6 foot tall, and he's I don't know, like 5'2", 5'3". Like he's not a big guy.
It's almost like forced perspective, that scene.
Yeah,
it's like Lord of the Rings or something, where they have to get people into positions to.
He would have made a great Hobbit.
Yeah, he would have, wouldn't he? Yeah.
But yes, no, I love those sort of jokes as well, sort of, But yeah,
there was something about. Sorry, I was going to say there's something about him that I'd never thought of before today as well. And I can't claim credit. I read it on the internet, so I'm not going to say it's mine. But I'd never picked up on the fact. So I was watching it today with this in mind, that he is the keymaster.
Yeah.
And he keeps getting locked out of his apartment. I'd never put those two things together before.
Wow, I've never thought that before. That's a really good point.
And it must be there on purpose, right? That must be part of the joke.
Yeah. That must be like, yeah, that's an Easter egg or like a little.
And I don't know how many times I've watched this film, and I've never put those two things together. So yeah, when I read that today, I was like, oh my God, that's genius. So that was in my head all the way through watching it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I do love how like desperate's probably the wrong word, but like I love how sort of far he's willing to go to impress Dana.
Yeah.
And there's subtle hints straight away. The moment you meet Dana Barrett, like she comes into her apartment, and one of the first things you learn is that her TV has been turned up real loud, and it's there to say, like, something weird is already going on. Like it's even at this point, it's a haunted house trope. And instead of sort of making it to be a creepy moment, it's just dropped. It's a dropped line of dialogue, and then followed up with Lewis Tully saying, "I tried to crawl out on the ledge to disconnect you, but I couldn't do it. So I just turned up my TV real loud, so everyone thinks there's a problem with TVs." And you're just sort of like, oh, it's kind of sweet, but also like you crawled out on the ledge to do that. Yeah, he's not a well man. Final cast member I want to sort of just talk about is, as you meant, is Peck.
Yeah.
Walter Peck, played by the great William Atherton. He is like, unfortunately, he's one of these actors. I wouldn't say stereotypes. I've seen him in a couple of things, but Peck, Walter Peck then leads on to the character, similar character he plays in Die Hard.
Mm-hmm.
So in a seminal sort of horror comedy, and in a seminal action film, he plays a complete prick.
Yeah, it's true.
So he's in 2 fantastic films, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is also great in this. I love how sort of like buttoned up he is, and how sort of like rigid he is. But yeah, I mean, what do you think, like William Atherton as Peck?
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely flawless himself as well. The kind of bureaucracy that he that just has that air around him. He almost has like this aura of bureaucracy as soon as he walks onto the screen, the way he holds himself. And as you said, like buttoned up, but like literally as well, like everything about him feels like kind of buttoned up and tight. Yeah, he's great. And look, Die Hard's my favorite film of all time. It's one I religiously watch every Christmas Eve. So no matter what I'm doing, somebody's going to have to watch that Christmas Eve. And I think, yeah, of course he's playing another, as you said, prick in that film, but not the same. He's doing something slightly different there, I think. So he does, even within his pricks, he does have range.
He has a series of pricks that he can sort of pull out whenever he wants.
He does, yeah.
But he is great in this. I say, yeah, I love some of the, again, you say about line delivery. He has, there's a great sort of scene between him and Venkman when he first comes in. Yeah. And Venkman sort of says, you didn't say the magic word. And he sort of, even then, he's still playing with him. He's sort of like, and what is the magic word? Yeah. And Venkman's like, please. Like, as if, like, like, didn't your parents teach you anything? But he's just so irritating. But one of the weird things is, and again, there's two things that got pointed out to me recently, which is quite interesting. Firstly, he represents the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, and to have them as a villain is so 80s. Like, in Reagan era America, like, yes, the EPA are the baddies, and you go, okay, they're stopping. We're trying to regulate all these small businesses. But the other thing is, someone pointed out to me that scene between Venkman and Peck. So, and I'm going to concede this point because it's sort of interesting, but the whole film is Venkman. The whole finale is Venkman's fault. Because if someone suggested to me, if Venkman had let Peck just see it and explained what it is, they wouldn't have shut down the protection grid at the end of the film. But like, again, that is what's ifs and buts. But like, yeah, it definitely sort of feels.
Yeah, it makes sense. So because Venkman's anti-authoritarian and he just wants to get in this guy's face. Absolutely. Yeah. It pushes him over the edge, and then therefore I can see that. Absolutely.
However, my point was Peck was always going to do it, like, because he comes in looking to sort of throw his weight around, show his power and stuff. Yeah. One of the things we'll get to, there's a couple of things on my list I want to talk about. One of the things I was interested in, and again, it's one of those things I've never thought about as a kid, because you just enjoy it, you go along for the ride. But there's a moment in this film that has always sort of made my brain work around it. There's a scene where Ray and Winston are in the car when they're coming back at night. It's a great scene. They talk about the Bible and they sort of quote. They quote sort of the end of days, Judgment Day. And Winston makes that point of sort of like, well, you ever thought we're so busy because the dead are coming back from the grave? So one of the things that sort of that's interesting is, and again, never thought about it as a kid, but as I've got older, it's like, okay, at the start of the film, there's the line where Venkman says to Ray, "You've been going around the five boroughs, sort of talking to anybody who'll listen about ghosts and the paranormal. You've talked to everybody for ages, and all of a sudden they see the ghost in the library, and then that's what sort of kicks off the story." Is Gozer already going to come? Is it sort of the Gozer sort of coming about? This event. Is Winston right? Or
so is it the argument of like escalation, a bit like the Batman thing, of like you dress up like a bat, he dresses up like a clown, and then
I was trying to figure out. So basically, sort of, there's a trigger point. So Gozer comes about. Zool, comes and possesses Dana Barrett, but the Ghostbusters are there to obviously to prevent it at the end. But there's sort of like the instigation for the Ghostbusters is they see. They get readings and stuff off of the library ghost, and then they build from there. But what triggers the library ghost? Is it the presence of Zool trying to break through the barrier that actually raises the paranormal, the PKE, if you will, in New York? So sort of like that, sort of like the coming of Gozer was actually what brought about the Ghostbusters as well. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? I think because you can point that finger that you can at a lot of films and a lot of media about this idea of, you know, like the plot convenience of the only people that can stop Gozer happen to have invented Ghostbusting a few weeks before or a few months before. But no, I think that's a really interesting take on it, because obviously we get the backstory, don't we, of the building being architecturally designed in order to allow for it. And whether we don't get given a date, do we? There's not like any kind of specifics of like, on this date, this is when it's going to happen. So I think they don't write themselves into that corner, which is good. But of course, Gozer's only able to make that final transition across to our reality because of what happens with the containment unit being shut down, right? That blast opens up some sort of... So yeah, it is all definitely all intrinsically entwined. So is it like a case of, as you said, this like PKE rising and this is fated to always happen?
And that's one of the things I always think is, like, you know, going back to thinking of like it's Venkman's fault. I almost think like this almost acts like a prophecy. Like Gozer, you know, Ivo Shandor was sort of like, you know, worship Gozer. He was working towards the coming of Gozer. Didn't live around long enough to see it. Something has brought Gozer to our dimension, and it's this sort of, like you say, it then becomes like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like it's supposed to have happened in this way. That you get the balance of good and sounds daft, but the balance of good and evil. Like Gozer coming is confronted by the Ghostbusters. Because again, like, you know, if it wasn't Ray, because Ray brings about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and they're able to tackle the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man with the proton beams, but like he could have just as easily brought in like 100-foot Freddy Krueger. Yeah, sure. Or some other sort of, you know, giant beast. And see, I don't know, just the more I've watched as I've got older, I'm like, this is a prophecy. Like that, you know, this feels a bit like there's something, it feels quite sort of eldritch and sort of grand in that scheme. Like this was, like you say, destined to happen. I think prophecy and destiny is the right word, isn't it? Because there is a lot of kind of there's a lot of like religious undertones, isn't there? And you know, they quote the Bible, and Venkman gets angry when the church is crushed. You know, I presume these have all been in there from the writing, probably from the script level, and we know that Dan Aykroyd's coming at this whole script is coming from a place of belief. I don't really know enough about what I know. He believes, and his family believing in ghosts, and that they communicate with them and stuff. But I don't know if that is then from a religious perspective. I'm not sure, but it's really interesting. And you know, of course, the idea of like rapture and all that is, you know, destined to happen and stuff, isn't it? So it's all there, isn't it, to be found? Yeah, I mean, you know, when they sort of talk about the you know, when Winston gives the prophecies are in the Bible of Judgment Day, you know, they talk about the dead rising and the seas boiling and all this other stuff, earthquakes, and you get, you know, I don't think you actually see the seas boiling, but you get earthquakes like before they start, like they start the ascent up the building. Like you get an earthquake, the roads all crack, and you get those signs. So yeah, it just, to me, like, just as I've got older, I'm like, you know, because I've seen people, you said about that, the contrivances. People have said, oh, it's you know, it's a bit contrived that they just happen to be around. I'm like, no, I think it's destiny. Like I think it's supposed to happen. And Venkman even says that, doesn't he? Sort of like, you know, I think we were destined to get thrown out of this dump. He does, yeah. So at the very beginning of the film, when they get thrown at the university, so I think, you know, even at the beginning of the film, they're telling you this is everything that's going to happen is destined to happen. So Venkman, you know, antagonizing Peck, destined to happen. Like, you know, they needed this anti-authoritarian to be, because if it had bumped into Ray or Egon, like that may not have happened. Events had to happen in this way for this thing to happen. So, you know, is Gozer or something? Is fate? Does fate have a hand in this from beyond or whatever? Maybe I'm getting too deep on a sort of a horror comedy from 1984. No. I mean, I'm sure they were thinking about that in the 2 weeks whilst they were sat in a vineyard drinking wine and writing the scripts. No, definitely. Yeah, it's one of the things I'd love to talk about sort of with Dan Aykroyd. Yeah, I'll never get the chance, to be honest. But, you know, if I ever had that chance, that's one of the things I'd definitely talk about. Couple of things that just in the last final bits and pieces we'll get through. Let's talk about the car. Sure. The 80s or the late 70s and the 80s are replete with awesome vehicles.
Sure.
I don't think we get as many awesome vehicles in sort of shows and film today. But Ecto 1, what were your thoughts on Ecto 1? Iconic, silly. What are your thoughts?
Oh, it's definitely iconic, isn't it? It's right up there. I mean, it is silly. Don't get me wrong, but why not? I mean, I think this movie manages to find that perfect balance between realism and silliness. You know, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is absolutely ridiculous, but somehow it just works. It just works for what they need at the end of that movie. And I think Ecto 1's the same, isn't it? Because it's somewhere between an ambulance and a hearse, and it's saving life, but death, like undertones as well. Yeah, and I don't know who was in charge of designing the look, but they got it spot on. And whoever did the siren sound as well. You know, that I've always thought if I could have any job in the world, it would be like a Foley artist or a sound designer, because it just, when you see behind the scenes, it just looks so much fun coming out with these sounds. But yeah, they definitely got that siren spot on, because you can just hear, even now I'm talking about it, I can hear it in the back of my head going around.
Yeah, it's almost like a recognizable, it's a siren, as in, you would recognize it as a sort of an emergency service siren, but it's still very distinctive. I did have it. I downloaded it as a ringtone and then had it as an alarm for all of 2 days. But before my beloved wife sort of said, "Get rid of that, or I get rid of you." I love the car. Like I say, it's played for jokes. I love the fact that when Ray gets it, it's like, everyone's not panicking. I found the car. He's like, it's a real deal. Sort of, just needs to get the shocks, the brakes. He like gives this laundry list. It's like cost him $5,000, which in '84 I'm sure is a lot more. The car is iconic. It's lived on. It's one of those, I think. I often think about something that was said. This was more relevant to like Judge Dredd and some other characters. So if you can draw a character's silhouette and have them be recognizable, then you have drawn something iconic. Sure. And I sort of think about that with the vehicles as well. Like if you were to draw the outline of Ecto 1, like it's instantly recognizable. Like,
Agreed.
I think the same as sort of like the '89 Batmobile, cars like that. You go, oh yeah, no, that is instantly recognizable. But it's not a sports car. Like you say, I love the fact it's not a sports car. And one of the behind the scenes thing is like they couldn't get it to go fast. It was highly unreliable, and so the first scene of them rocketing out of the firehouse is actually sped up, and it's one of those things. When you're a kid, you watch it and you don't recognize these things, but when you watch it now, yes, that's clearly sped up. That car's probably doing about 20 miles an hour.
That reveal is so perfectly handled, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
With like the doors opening, the license plate, and then the siren, and then the birth. Yeah, it's so good.
Well, that's the thing. Like I said, there's so many iconic shots in this as well. That, like you say, that thing of the reveal of the car, the reveal of sort of Stay Puft at the end, through the buildings, the moment they walk into the Sedgwick Hotel, the first time you really see them in their uniform, all those sort of things. Yeah, it's so like you said, they recognize that Ivan Reitman and don't know who did the cinematography, but they recognize how to set up like an iconic shot. Like it's
and when to hold stuff back as well, like Venkman getting slimed.
Yeah,
who knows what that could have looked like with the budget and the effects that they were doing. It may have looked all right, but the tracking of following Ray to find Venkman after he's been slimed is so good. I mean, it's almost like Kubrick's The Shining or something. But the idea of like we're now with him and we're desperately trying to get there to find out what's happened to Venkman, if he's okay, and then we find him doing the weird little kind of slime dance on the floor. Like to choose to frame it from that perspective, to actually take away from us what could have been a really cool iconic shot, was equally as clever and equally as good filmmaking.
Yeah, you say that one of the things is I've read, and whether this is true or not, I don't know, but apparently sort of following the special editions of the Star Wars being released, and Lucas obviously going back, a number of films and a number of people were approached and were like, would you like to do this to your film? And apparently sort of Ivan Reitman and stuff were approached and said, would you like to? And he was like, no, it is what it is. Leave it alone.
Yeah, right.
And I sort of respect him for that because, there could have been that thing of like, oh, yeah, we could actually sort of cut a little bit later and we could have like a CGI Slimer coming in and doing this and that. And like, no, it wouldn't work. It is what it is. And I like you're right. I think cutting away budget, obviously, drove some of this.
Yeah.
But also I just think, a good editing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Know when to cut away.
It's instincts as well sometimes, isn't it? Just like Jaws, we all know the story behind the filmmaking of Jaws, and so much of that was down to issues that were going on set and budget and mechanics and all that kind of stuff. But actually, the people that were making that film, Spielberg and his editor and the writers, just like Reitman and Aykroyd and Ramis, they know what they're doing, these people. And when a problem is put in front of them, they can creatively resolve that. And actually sometimes better than it may have been originally. Yeah.
I often wonder, this is one of those films I often think I'd love to have been in the editing room when they were putting this together. The different takes or different angles they may have shot, and some scenes where they're like, yes, we're going to use that, or we're going to cut back on that, and this is where we're going to cut, those sort of things. Yeah. Because even then, like you said, a joke, you made a really good point before about everyone given a chance to shine and them not overshadowing anyone. There's moments, like you say, where they just cut a scene, like they don't linger on certain things, or they just give it just long enough.
Agreed. This would be 2.5 hours if it was made nowadays.
Yeah, you're right. And it's now 45.
Yeah.
And like I say, and the same for the sequel. The sequel's about the same length. And like I say, but if you were to put this in the hands of a, if this was not looking reboot, that's what we've had that. But if this was to start now, this would be over 2-hour film. With like those long lingering joke scenes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting, and we talked about iconic, and we're going to talk about the music. You talked about you had the soundtrack. So there's two elements of the music. There's the soundtrack, which is the songs, and then there's the score. And they are two very, very different things. I love them both. The song Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr. is inescapable. And catchy as hell.
Oh yeah.
And like you said, in heavy rotation, but it's not the only good song.
No.
On that soundtrack, it's just a belting tune. I mean, what else? I'm not going to ask you to name the songs, but like,
yeah, I mean, you got Cleaning Up the Town, haven't you? For the montage, which is awesome. Magic is really well selected for that moment, as all the ghosts are bursting out and going, because it has a real kind of haunting quality to it. But I agree. I think the score is fantastic as well. I think something I read today, I think, was that he wasn't. Is it Elmer Bernstein? Is that right?
Yeah,
he was a little put out about the fact that he'd had this score he'd created, and then they were going to stick in some pop songs. But then when he saw what the songs they picked, he felt like it all gelled together really well. And if I remember rightly, I don't sadly have that cassette tape anymore and a Walkman to listen to it on. But it was a mixture, I think. I'm sure you could get the two separate, but I'm sure the one I had like some score music alongside the soundtrack. Yeah,
so you are right. So the album that was the soundtrack had all the songs on it, and there are some belters on there, some really good songs. And then it had what they called the Ghostbusters theme and Dana's theme.
That's right. Yeah, okay. Which is like the love kind of theme.
Yeah. And then the Ghostbusters theme, which isn't the Ray Parker Jr. It's a different song. It's the sort of like you hear it at the very beginning of the film, and it's sort of interwoven in little bits.
Okay.
That's the one. Yeah. So
it's still up there. It's still up there.
Yeah, I would do it, but I'm tone deaf. So even if I did it, to me it would sound right, but everyone else would be like, "What are you doing?" It sounds nothing like anything. That sound. So the full Elmer Bernstein score wasn't released until the 40th anniversary. And so it was released on sort of CD and LP and all that kind of stuff. And when you listen to it, you realize like there's so much music that he wrote and he obviously scored like that's not in the film. Like there's a whole sort of like steel drum bit in the score, which is ace, but like Never appears anywhere. But Elmer Bernstein's score is really good because he uses unusual instruments. Like it's sort of set to be weird. It's very sort of. It reminds me very much of sort of like. It keeps the eerie, but has the comedy sort of like you said, the dun 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 sort of like kind of thing. That reminds me of Abbott and Costello or those sorts of things from the sort of the 40s. But what's the instrument? I'm trying to think of what's it called, but it's the two sort of like aerials, and as you put your hand in, it changes.
Theremin.
Theremin, there you go. I was thinking of Fermi. I'm thinking that's the Fermi paradox, which is something completely different. But a theremin, and he uses that really well, and that's in the film as well. But yeah, Elmer Bernstein's score it's one of those scores I think that gets underappreciated because it was never fully released. And everyone talks about obviously the Ghostbusters songs, but yeah, that score is absolutely wonderful.
Well, I know what I'll be listening to tomorrow.
It's available. It's I don't think it's not hugely expensive. You can pick up the MP3 on like Amazon or on iTunes or whatever. Yeah, well worth tracking down. Really, it is really, really good. It's one of those that sort of like you say, now you've watched the film today, you'll listen to that score and in your head you'll be like, oh, that goes to that bit. Oh, that goes to that bit.
Sure. Yeah.
It's great.
That's the best part about doing it.
Yeah.
I was interested, just before you move on, it's like when I was doing my little bits of research and stuff today, something else the two things was my Keymaster being locked out, and then this idea of Ray Parker Jr. and Huey Lewis in the News. And I listened to that song today. What was it called? It's something like I want a drug. Or I want a new drug. I think it's called the Huey Lewis in the News song. I've never heard that song before. No. He definitely had a case.
Oh yeah. They settled out of court.
I believe he got some. There is some heavy similarities between those two songs.
If I believe right, that sort of like Ray Parker, the story from Ray Parker Jr. is he locked himself in a room and he sort of came up with the song in 3 days.
Right.
And there's a part of me that I've heard it as well. I think every Ghosthead, like every Ghostbusters fan's going, I'm going to go find out how is it true? And you listen to it and you do go, oh, oh yes.
That's exactly what I did.
I wonder what Mr. Parker Jr. was listening to just before he locked himself away for 3 days.
Yeah. Well, I think it was used to temp music, wasn't it? Which I know happens a lot in filmmaking and editing. So it must be hard to get away from it once you've heard it matched to that scene. But I was quite shocked actually. I did exactly that noise. Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If
I was Huey, I'd be a bit annoyed.
Yeah, I think you got to pay out. I think they settled out of court, so it's all good.
Yeah.
The other thing to note actually, you talk about sort of court cases, because this film isn't shy around the things. It's actually the name. So up until literally like the 13th hour, this film wasn't called Ghostbusters. It was going to be called like Ghost Chasers or Ghost Crushers and a whole bunch of other things. They were sort of banding around a bunch of others because there's a 1970s live action thing, a cartoon called Ghostbusters. That was I think it was a Hanna-Barbera sort of job, and they had the copyright. But Dan Aykroyd and stuff wanted to call it, and Ivan Reitman wanted to call it Ghostbusters. So the scene where they got Ghostbusters on the big banner they have above the thing. So there's multiple versions of that where they've got the different names, and they have obviously Venkman reacting to it. But the scene that confirmed it is the moment they turn up at Dana's building at the end, and they were trying to get the people chanting, something. And they locked on to Ghostbusters.
Sure.
And that's all by accident. And you get them going, Ghostbusters. And apparently at that point, they filmed it and they sent the dailies off.
Nice.
To Columbia. And were like, you need to pay Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
They need to be paid off. This is the name of the film. And they saw that and they were like, okay, we've got to go sort that out.
Yeah, nothing else sounds as good, does it? Ghost Smashers and
Yeah,
Ghostbusters just has a ring to it. I mean, it's nothing to do with how iconic it's become since. It's just something about it.
It works, doesn't it? It's that sort of.
It does. And like busting ghosts sounds great. Smashing ghosts, catching ghosts, whatever they're going to go with. Yeah, it just has something about it.
Well, even
money well spent.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like even for Ray Parker Jr., sort of like chasing makes me feel good. Doesn't really
it doesn't no.
work. So yeah, no, it's again we're going back to lightning in the bottle. All the things sort of fell into place, and that's obviously why the cartoons has to be called the real Ghostbusters, because they couldn't have a cartoon called Ghostbusters because there was already a cartoon called. I love the fact they're like, no, but we're the real Ghostbusters. None of your Hanna-Barbera nonsense. So yes, we talked about the music, we talked about this other stuff. So really, just sort of round out, sort of, is that thing of we sort of answered. You've shown it to your kids, and having watched it and discussed it, then Ghostbusters 1984. Does it stand up? Is it a film that do you is it one that will be in your rotation in the future? Do you still love it? What are your final thoughts?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones you could, a bit like Back to the Future, I'd say, like that kind of movie. You could stick it on. It could be in the background, and you slowly find yourself being drawn in whatever else you think you were going to do whilst it was on. You'd watch it, or you put it on because you want to watch it, and you would just sit rigidly and it'd come on TV. You wouldn't be able to turn over. You'd be up till 3 a.m. watching it. Yeah, definitely. It stays in hard rotation. I think watching it with my eldest, he was 7. There were a couple of times as the parent was like, "Oh, yeah, I've forgotten about Ray getting a blowjob," and like Dana's sexiness when she's trying to seduce. Well, not Dana's sexiness, sorry. Zul's sexiness when she's trying to seduce Venkman. But when you're 7, that shit goes over your head, just like it did for you and me. I'm sure when we first watched it, he didn't pick up on any of it. Yeah, definitely. My youngest is now 2, nearly 3, so when he's old enough, he'll be watching it too.
Excellent. Yeah, that's it. Raising them right. That's what you're doing, man. You're raising them right. Absolutely. You're right. I love it. And otherwise I wouldn't be doing this really. But yeah, it's you're right about some of the things. There are bits that have dated. It's a time capsule as well about 80s New York. Yeah. It's a New York film as well. It's a good example of those sort of New York films. But also, like I say, I think it's a quintessential 80s movie. Like you mentioned, sort of like Back to the Future. Back to the Future is an almost perfect film for exactly what it wants to be. And I think this is up there with that as a representation of sort of like 80s cinema. But you mentioned about this. Yeah, there's so much that like we've talked about, like that could have been. You talked about Ray getting a blowjob from a ghost, which is bizarre that it even stays in the film because that's actually from a bigger scene. Originally, that wasn't part of a dream sequence. That was actually going to be he and Winston go into Fort Den something or other. They actually go to an investigation, and it was going to be that he was going to look round, put on the coat, lie on the bed, and then a ghost was going to sexually assault him. And they were like, "Don't think we need that, but we'll keep in the blowjob joke, and we'll make it a dream sequence." Which works. It's a joke. It becomes a joke. So you're like, oh, okay, it's just Ray having a sort of like a sexy ghost dream. So yeah, it sort of, to me, this film sort of stands up. I think, like you say, the charm of the special effects, practical special effects as well.
Yeah.
Some of the ghosts. There's some matte paintings and some of the bits that don't work at the end. A bit sort of shonky, but I'm glad they've kept them there. If I'm honest. Agreed. And yes, Venkman, probably isn't the best role model for anyone. And it's, when I talk to Max in the next episode about Ghostbusters 2, we'll understand why he probably wasn't the person to be Oscar's father. So yes, I think you're right. It's a great film, and I'm so glad I got to talk about it. And it'll be interesting to see how this sort of stacks up. But we're going to do. There are 2 final things I've got to do. The 2 final questions. So. Number 1, we've been talking about Ghostbusters. Speculation and thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife. You've seen the trailer. Have you seen the trailers? Have you seen the bits and pieces?
I have. Yeah, I've seen the trailers. I mean, I'm trepidatiously excited. I mean, Paul Rudd elevates basically everything he's in, other than Halloween 6, as I found out recently. Yeah. Other than that, so yeah, his presence fills me with joy. Obviously, it's essentially going to be Stranger Things meets Ghostbusters, isn't it? I mean, you can't stick one of the kids from Stranger Things in it, but everything now is pretty much Stranger Things. Yeah, come whatever it might be, because that's just has had such an indelible impact on cultural society. I think it's going to be good. You talking about practical effects? That's my one concern isn't the right word because it's not that strong, but I think I haven't seen the 2016 remake. I just wasn't drawn to it really. But I think I am going to watch it now ahead of Afterlife coming out, because I want to see how like the three kind of iterations stack up against each other. You know, the kind of the 84 and the sequel is of a time, isn't it? And then you get the 2016, and now you're getting Afterlife. Because I think the CGI nature takes away some of that tangibility. And after all, we're talking about a film which is about ghosts, which you shouldn't really be able to touch. But these ghosts have a tangible presence. They slime and they can drive cars and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's the only thing that I'm not sure about. Hopefully, they'll do a mixture of the practical and the CGI.
From what I understand, they've said there is some practical in there. I don't know, like you say, it might just be a token practical effects. I get the feeling if you've watched the latest trailer, there's a terror dog in it eating something out of a bag, and when it raises its head, I'm like, that looks practical. Sure. But other than that, but then there's obviously scenes where it's running around. I'm like, oh, that's clearly not. But I wonder, like, you know, was there some that had sort of a, like they've put some on as a physical presence? It'd be interesting to see. I agree. It's one of those things that's sort of like, I'm not one of these that decries all CGI, you know.
No, of course not.
But you're totally right. I love puppetry and I love practical effects. I've literally just watched all the Chucky films, like all the Child's Play films. And, you know, the puppetry in some of those is fantastic. The facial stuff on it's fantastic. The fact I'm watching, like, you know, a puppet as a star of a film is like a horror film, you know, says it all. So I hope you're right. I hope they do. I recommend 2016. You'll think I won't give my, you know, thoughts on it just now, but it's worth checking out if you're going to watch it. You know, watch them all.
It's not the female lineup that's the thing. You know, I'm not one of those guys, which I think, you know, everybody that's heard me on anything that I've done before knows. There is one particular person within the lineup which is the big off-putting thing for me, who happens to be female, but she just happens to be omnipresent and you can't escape her. But I don't find her a particularly charming presence on screen.
Interesting. You can say it here. There is no judgment.
Yeah, Melissa McCarthy, isn't it? That's in it. I don't find her a very charming screen presence.
Yeah, she's a Marmite kind of actress. Because I know people that really like her, and I know other people that are like you that are like, yeah, can't stand it. Like she sort of, you know. But again, like, she's almost like I always find, like, my dad cannot stand Jim Carrey. Like the moment he comes on screen, he's like, nope, I'm off, I'm done. Cannot stand him. And I know people that are sort of the same with Melissa McCarthy. Like anything she's in, like, no, she just makes this worse, and we'll leave it. So I know she has that sort of, you know, say Marmite. I'll keep it that.
She's like the female James Corden, eh?
Yeah, but I think more people hate James Corden, don't
they? Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it'd be interesting what you think about that. But anyway, final question. Then we've gone through different pieces. Is okay. I'm asking this of everybody as I go through these, fans and reviewers. Do you believe in ghosts?
No. Do I have my license to be a Ghostbusters fan revoked immediately?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I do. I think I'm one of those very definitively practical, scientific-minded people that kind of see the end as the end, and then we turn into dirt. And I don't know any better than anybody else, but I'd love to have an experience which would allow me to. I'm open to that completely. I thought, but it hasn't happened yet.
No, everyone's open to, like I say, up to their opinion. That's what I want to see how many people do believe. Yeah, makes you a bit difficult to be a Ghostbuster if you don't believe in ghosts.
It does.
That's sort of like true. Job done. They don't exist. Job done. There we go. Move
Absolutely. Hey, look, that's the best thing about being a Ghostbuster is, again, I love that scene when they come out of the hotel ballroom and they've caught Slimer, and they're like, you know, they're charging, it's $4,000 for this and $1,000 for this and $1,000 for that, and they're like, well, we'll just go and put him back then. Like, the guy who's paying out has got no evidence that anything has happened whatsoever, other than the fact they've completely just fucked up his ballroom. That's the best thing about any Ghostbuster. It's like, yeah, we've caught him. He's in here. Don't worry about it. They are the only ones who really know for sure whether it's true or not.
Yeah, in this film, Yeah,
In this film, that's true.
They definitely try and address. I think that's a noticed thing in this, and they definitely address it in some of the future ones. But yes, no, this has been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed talking Ghostbusters, and I could talk more, but it's getting on, it's getting late, and you know, we've got other films to talk about. That we get into Ghostbusters 2 in the next episode with other friend of the show, Max Byrne. 2016 with your sister Rhea Carrigan. And then I still have a slot. I'm not sure who it's going to be yet, because obviously we've got Afterlife coming at the end of all this. But amongst all of this, I am speaking to Ghost Heads UK. I'm speaking to Channeling Spirits. I'm speaking to a couple of people all about their Ghostbusters fandom, cosplayers, podcasters, all the works. It's going to be great. So this is Ghostbusters month. And, you know, there we go. We started with the film review. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've been enjoying it. But James, before we go, your pop, where can people find you, and where can people find Season's Greetings and Pop Gorillas?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm part of the Comics Emotion Network family now, quite entrenched, I think.
Yeah.
No getting rid of me now, it's too late. And that's where you'll find Season's Greetings, which I co-host with Tony. So we watch an entire series, obviously through an order. We've done all of Buffy, and we're halfway through Angel now. And we're starting to think about what we're going to be doing next from our extensive list of potential choices. Yeah, I'm a pop gorilla, which is like a sister, we're tangentially connected to Comics Emotion. I mean, essentially, Dave and Chris just help everyone do what they need to do. So they've given us plenty of airtime, which has been amazing. We've really appreciated that. And we do have a Twitter handle, which is pop, and it's gorilla, but as if we are out stalking you and you can't escape us, and we're going to pop up at any time, rather than the 8th. And then me personally, I'm on Twitter under I am Jack's Musings, and that's JACS. And I just post basically my diary of watching and reading, which is somewhat, Tony's the real driving force, but he said he was inspired by the fact of what I hope are quite pithy little reviews of what I've been experiencing.
I like your reviews. I love them. I agree.
I appreciate it.
And I like the fact that, like you say, some of those are sort of, I like to come and find your reviews from my sister podcast, Stories Out Time and Space.
Yeah.
Often when Julian and I have a consideration or thoughts, I like to sort of see what people are doing. If you sometimes you do a lot of watch alongs. So
I do, yeah.
I do like to sort of find out what other people are thinking. If you're on board, or if sort of and we've got one coming up. I ain't gonna lie. We watched Event Horizon. Yeah, we may be controversial on that one.
Oh, okay. I'm behind. I've got to catch up with you guys. So I'll look forward to that. I'll try and do it in time for Event Horizon.
Excellent. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. And if you, like I say, we're giving all these little pops, go check out Pop Gorillas. I am going to say one thing, actually. When your logo becomes a sticker, I want it as a vinyl sticker or something. I absolutely love your logo. It's awesome. But yeah, later, if you like what we're doing, go onto your podcast catcher. You listen to us into your ears. Go to your device. Leave a review. 5 stars, 4 stars. Leave a review. Let us know what you think about all our feedback. And go on to Patreon. Patreon.com/20CG Media. For 3 different tiers. Loads of stuff on there. One of the best things, we do a weekly podcast, me and Julian Darius of Stories Out Time and Space, going through the Twilight Zone. As also me doing 30-minute thoughts every month, and our quarterly Creator Corner. So much content on there. If you like me rambling, it's fantastic. You love it. But other than that, James, thank you very much for talking Ghostbusters with me.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been great.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. And we shall talk again soon.